Hi, this is your video on how to draw Lewis dot diagrams, which you're going to practice after this video in your notebook. First, before we do that, we need to review a little bit about the Bohr models and valence electrons that you've been working with earlier in this video. So just a quick review. We've got argon here, who has 18 protons, and so we put, which also means they're going to be neutral atoms, it's going to have 18 electrons. So we're going to put 2 on the first one, 8 on the next one, and then 8 on the next one. And notice how these are very organized in pairs. You're going to see why in a second, why we do that. And so when we look at valence electrons, we only care about what's going on this outside ring, or energy level, is what we call it. With the Bohr model. And we find out there are 8 valence electrons for the element argon. And so from here on out, we're really only going to care what's going on in this outside energy level. These other levels are filled, and that's awesome. But when it comes to drawing Lewis dot diagrams, all we care about is what's on this outside ring. So a couple other examples. We have fluorine. And it has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So its valence electrons is 7. We have carbon here, who has 1, 2, 3, 4 valence electrons on the outside ring. And then last but not least, we have phosphorus, who has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 valence electrons. So you should have also found out that when we put these on our periodic tables, we ended up with a pattern where everything in this column had 1s, everything in this column had 2 valence electrons, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and a little bit of an oddball over here for a 2. So before you get to this video, you are also to have these written on your periodic table. So these numbers should be written in the boxes. We also don't do much with what we call these transition metals and this kind of extra couple rows down here. This pattern doesn't hold up for these elements, and we're going to need a different model other than the Bohr model to describe how their electrons behave, which you're going to learn in future lessons in chemistry. So again, the periodic table with the valence electrons written in it, with the numbers written in the rows, with the exception of helium over here, which only has 2 valence electrons. But you'll learn in the next lesson why we have helium hang out over here instead of over here with the beryllium's column. Okay, so we're going to use an example of phosphorus to figure out how to do these Lewis dot diagrams. So we're just going to look at P. We're going to find out that it has 5 valence electrons. So another way to view that is that it's got 5 on its outside shell. But we don't need to make the Bohr model every time at this point. You've done that. Now let's just use the patterns that our periodic table gives us to help us out. So when we make a Lewis dot diagram, we're going to imagine, and when I say imagine, I really do mean imagine, that there are these benches and squares around our element. And we're going to take the atomic symbol for that element, and we're just going to write it. And then we're just going to imagine that there are 4 benches surrounding the element symbol. And then we're going to start putting the dots down. Now, if you got in the habit of putting these electrons on the outside shell in this pattern, this is going to be really easy for you. If you haven't, start now. So we know we have 5 valence electrons, and we're going to start putting those electrons on these benches, but man, these electrons, they don't like sharing space. They like to be by themselves at first. So we put 1 on each bench. Now there's 5 of them, so it's getting a little crowded. So we're going to have to put 1 more and have them share. So now we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 valence electrons. And then as you start doing these, you're going to want to draw them if it helps you figure out where to place them. If you don't need it, don't draw them because you're going to have to erase them. Because we do not put these little benches here. Those are just to kind of help us think about where we're going to put these electrons. And then I like to kind of shore it up a little bit and make them kind of feel tight. So that's our Lewis dot diagram for our element phosphorus. In your notes you did chlorine. So I'm just going to show you how to do chlorine. I'd like you to have your notes out right now, and so you can add little notes to it to help you figure out and remember how to draw these Lewis dot diagrams. So I'm just going to go through the slide that you copied into your notes. So your slide title and your section title in your notes was called Drawing Lewis Diagrams. And we started with chlorine. So their first step is to write the symbol for the element. Example is Cl for chlorine. This is not an I, this is an L. Chlorine's a little tricky. And that you need to, this is a lowercase l. Your second step is to find the valence electrons you wrote on your periodic table. So if you go back here, we found that chlorine is in the column of 7s. So that is where you're going to find your valence electrons. So chlorine has 7 valence electrons. Then you're going to put your imaginary benches out, 1 on each side of the symbol. And then you're going to start with those first 4 and make them lonely. Remember, electrons don't like to share benches if they don't have to. So you're going to put 1 on each side, and that's our first 4, but we're trying to get to 7. So we're going to keep going around in a circle, and we're going to pair them up until we get to 7. Okay. Then you want to erase your benches if you are drawing your benches, and this is your final answer. Okay. I hope this this video is helpful for you. Definitely a video you're going to want to look back at to see how they're doing, how to do them when you are practicing these in your notebook. Also, feel free to Google drawing Lewis diagrams and look for some other videos that might help you as well. Hope you enjoy the video.